Hello.
Hello, we have people coming into the room now. So we are live.
Yeah.
So for those who are just joining us, we're just waiting a few more minutes while people start getting signed in. So it'll be a few moments before we actually get started. So just a reminder to our presenters, we are currently live. We are currently live, Angela.
Oh, hello.
There we go.
So people are coming in now, and so we're just going to wait a few moments before we begin. But to those who are here and can see us and hear us right now, we're happy that you're able to join us on today's webinar. Like I said, it'll just be a few moments before we get started. We will start right on time at noon. So again, it'll just be a few minutes while we get started. So those who are joining us right now, thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, we'll get started right away at noon. So again, to all those who are joining us right now, thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. We'll get started in a few moments. We're going to start right away at noon. And also for those who are joining us as attendees, we can't hear you, so that's good. We can only hear the presenters, which are, of course, myself as moderator, and Rodrigo and Angela, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you don't have to worry. You're not on video, and we can't hear you. And with the sheer number of people that we have attending today's webinar, we won't have you all on video. Okay, so I see quite a few people have signed in. We're pretty much at noon. We'll wait one more moment. Okay, well, it is now noon, so we are going to get started. Good afternoon, officially. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Hunter Boucher, Director of Operations at LandlordBC. Again, thank you for joining us in our webinar, COVID-19 Precautions for Multi-Unit Residential Buildings. This webinar is produced in collaboration with LandlordBC, the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, CHOA, and the National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health, NCCEH. I would like to thank our two expert presenters, who I'll be bringing on in just a moment, and they'll be sharing their slides, Angela Eichelbosch of the NCCEH, and Rodrigo Mora of BCIT. Keeping up to date in these ever-changing times can be difficult, so please watch LandlordBC's e-news and website for industry news and announcements for upcoming webinars. If you are not already enrolled to receive our e-news, simply visit landlordbc.ca and sign up at the bottom of the page. We're grateful to today's sponsor, Wise Submetering. Forward-thinking owners and managers are embracing submetering, and more of these companies are choosing Wise Meter Solutions as their partner. With 185,000 suites under contract, Wise has become synonymous with creating the efficient buildings of tomorrow your residents want today. Angela will begin today's presentation, followed by Rodrigo, and we will end this webinar with a Q&A session. So please send your questions in as you think of them throughout the presentation, and we will get to them at the end. So without anything further from myself, I'm going to invite Angela to join us now. So you are now live, Angela, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing so you can share your slides.
And that's about 0.5 to 20%, which varies a lot depending on how easily you can isolate a sick person in your home. Do you have another bathroom? Do you have another bedroom? So that's why that varies a lot, but it's pretty low. We also have had, now you can see in the media, many outbreaks in residential buildings, but all of them have some sort of interpersonal interaction or shared facility aspect to them. So long-term care homes and seniors homes, they have shared caregivers. They have social programming, the bus to the casino. Those are all ways that the virus can spread between close contact between people. And then in other settings like work camps and dorms, there may be shared kitchens and bedrooms and lounge areas. And then finally in prisons, everything up to the bathroom is shared, right? So there's zero personal space in a prison, which makes them very high-risk environments for this disease. There are specific instances in which droplet or aerosol transmission has been implicated over a short range. So there was a restaurant in China where one diner seems to have passed the infection to other people sitting in the stream of the air conditioner. There was a Washington choir where all these people got together and sang at each other for a couple of hours, and something like half of them got sick. There was also a Korean call center that was like very crowded and poorly ventilated, where the disease spread pretty far. And this was, again, it's not long range transmission, it's short range transmission. People are together and that's why they're getting sick. As for our MURBs, I have yet to see any evidence of aerosol transmission or massive outbreaks in MURBs, or situations where you have reason to believe that people on different floors or in different suites are getting it. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay, so evidence or absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. However, because all these other outbreaks are popping up, the fact that they're not popping up in these particular kinds of buildings is somewhat promising. So we'll just say there's no evidence to date, but I would love to hear if anybody has information that I don't have. So what does this all mean for our MURBs? Well, it means that we need to keep people away from each other. This is critical. So amenities that cause people to gather need to be closed. You need to limit access in elevators and laundry rooms. If they're small laundry rooms, you need to think about how many people can be in there. You need to discourage gatherings. You need to discourage lingering. So, you know, get your mail and then go to your suite. Don't hang out and be in that space, because you're putting your droplets out into that space, which is what we don't want. And then of course we need to have meetings differently. We can't have face-to-face meetings. So having council meetings and AGMs and these sorts of things by electronic means or virtual means is what we have to do. We also need to enhance cleaning. So high-touch surfaces need to be cleaned frequently, and I'll talk about that a bit more. We also need to prevent cross-contamination in laundry rooms between sick households and not sick. Also in washrooms. And the NCCEH webpage has a poster for this. If you need something to just stick up in your building, we've got a really good one. You also need to close what you can't clean. If you can't keep something clean based on the usage of the thing, or you can't supervise it to ensure that it's not clean, or that people are respecting social distancing, then it's probably preferable to clean it. That's not an order, but you know, it's common sense. You also need to communicate with residents and reinforce that public health messaging that has come down to us from on high, from Dr. Bonnie Henry. And the reason why is that it's working, and we need to keep it working as long as we possibly can. And the management of buildings and strata councils have a huge role to play in that. We also need to keep people comfortable and healthy in their homes. And so this is what Rodrigo is going to be speaking about a little bit more. So cleaning and disinfection. I'll try to get through this pretty quickly. The Public Health Agency of Canada is recommending manual cleaning with soap and water and or a disinfectant product. So a lot of people are using those 2-in-1 wipes, which they clean and they disinfect. Those are different things. Cleaning is removing the soil. Disinfecting is killing the virus. You have to do both. So those 2-in-1 wipes, they only actually work on lightly soiled surfaces, so keep that in mind. Some buildings have been reaching out and saying that they're buying specialized disinfectants. That's not necessary. This virus is not a superbug. It's easily killed. And in fact, Health Canada has a product list on their website of all the different disinfectants that you can look to buy. If you need to find one, then you can look on that website. So frequency of cleaning of the high touch surfaces, I should specify, is determined by traffic. So recommendations range from 1 to 3 times a day. The pandemic influenza plan here in BC says 2 times a day. However, you have to recognize that traffic may vary. Also, it may be very difficult to contract cleaners right now. So that's a problem that many people have been sharing. So vacuuming, I've had questions on vacuuming because it creates dust and it can re-aerosolize droplets that have fallen on the floor and dried out. So the pandemic plan for vacuuming says to use a vacuum with a HEPA exhaust filter, and to make sure that the exhaust is not blowing a jet that can re-aerosolize things, but is actually a diffuse exhaust. So, and built-in vacuums are best if you have it, but if not, a good vacuum with a good filter. So one other thing I should mention, BC CDC has a poison control center, and we are getting a lot of calls about people mixing products or hurting themselves using disinfectants. And so it's very, very important to always follow the label. Make sure it's being properly diluted, use gloves, use the product properly. It can be very dangerous if you don't. And we actually have an NCCEH document on disinfectants and household cleaning on our website if you want more information on that, especially bleach. Bleach should be used very cautiously. So spraying and fogging is interesting. People are spraying and fogging, not so much in Canada, but elsewhere, both indoors and outdoors, and they're spraying things like bleach, dilute bleach. Some are using hydrogen peroxide. There's other products that are used indoors because they're not as damaging. The issues with spraying and fogging is that they're going to have very reduced effectiveness on soiled or porous surfaces. So they may not be a good, clean solution. They're also not a one-time treatment. If you fog today and somebody goes through there, you must fog tomorrow. So it's not a one-time thing. Some products, especially bleach and others actually, can trigger chemical sensitivities. And for that reason, you may have a lot of difficulty getting buy-in from your residents if you want to try to do this. So overall, Public Health Agency of Canada says elbow grease is best, manual clean, and don't do this thing, what they're doing. That is an extreme example. So personal protective equipment for staff and cleaners is something we get a lot of questions about. The first best piece of advice is you should always use PPE as per the label on the disinfectant product. So if it says use gloves, use gloves. They can be very damaging to your skin. If you don't have gloves and wipes, for example, then reusable products are also okay. For rags, you have to launder and dry hot. And for gloves, like kitchen gloves, you just take them off and dry them, and then you only use them for that purpose. You don't try to keep using those over and over again. Or you don't try to use those for other parts of other cleaning, like cleaning in your home. If you're using them for the elevator, they're only for the elevator. Masking is a really big question. So does your cleaner need a mask? So generally, if the cleaner is with close contact with other people, then yes. However, if they're not around people generally, then they don't need a mask, unless he or she is creating dust. So even pre-pandemic, if your staff member, your cleaner, is doing something like beating carpets, or they have a really bad vacuum, or they're doing something where they're creating a lot of dust, that's an occupational health hazard, and they need to be wearing a dust mask. So that's regardless of the pandemic. And then finally, some people may wish to use a non-medical cloth mask to protect others, and that shouldn't be discouraged. But if you need more information on masking, the NCCEH also has a guided doc on masking. So our bigger concern right now is actually house humans. And that is because people are spending more time indoors than they have ever before. And this is likely to continue for some time into the future. So we really need to help people stay healthy indoors. And obviously that happens via a variety of means. But one of the ways that we stay healthy is we are very dependent on receiving healthy indoor air when we live in these MURBs. So this is more important now than ever, that your building ventilation system is performing as it's intended. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to pass things off to Rodrigo.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Can everybody see this and hear me? Hello? Oops.
I can hear you.
I share my screen.
You need to share your screen.
Oops, sorry, yeah. Forgot to do that. Share my screen. Okay. I think now is okay. Good, huh? Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. So I'll talk about ventilation and air quality. So let's get started with the question: what is in the air we breathe? That's something. Unfortunately, we take our air for granted, and then we don't realize that air has a lot of stuff. You know, we have gases of nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor, plus so many pollutants that we cannot see. So that's one thing that we, this is just a list, just a sample of things that could be in the air. But so we have to realize that that's the first thing. What can make us sick? A lot of stuff in the air can make us sick. That's one thing. And where does it come from? Well, it comes from indoors, but also it comes from outdoors. So that's important. The other important thing is that sometimes we rely on our nose to tell us what's in the air, and we know our nose is not very reliable sensor because we get adapted. Sometimes we smell things and then we adapt to the smells and we get used to them. And sometimes we don't smell things that are in the air. So we have to be careful about that. So again, this is just, you know, for you to be aware that, you know, ventilation in buildings, especially in multi-unit residential buildings, is not designed for pathogens. It's designed to dilute lots of stuff that could possibly be in the air in our buildings. So here I want to show is, like, you can see range. There's so many particles. The particle size is very important. We can say what is in the air can be divided into gases and particles. And for example, you see tobacco smoke. Tobacco smoke has a big range. It contains gases, it's an aerosol, vapors, and particles, small, big particles, so it can travel very far. One thing from the size that you can say is that the smaller particles, of course, you know, it's intuitive, that travel farther. The bigger ones stay closer to the source. So we know that. we see here the viruses. We see that about 10 microns is where the range of the size of the particles that remain airborne. Again, the smaller tend to travel farther. The bigger ones, by gravity, tend to fall near to the source. So cooking, for example, is an example. When we cook, is like tobacco smoke. It produces a lot of stuff. We could produces gases and particles, and that's why it's so important to have our kitchen exhaust range working when we're cooking, because it produces so many things. Okay, so we know that there's a lot of stuff in the air that can make us sick. So there's a list here of the risk factors for poor indoor quality. So what should we look for? What should we be concerned about in our air quality? We should be concerned. We shouldn't be concerned, actually. What Angela was saying is that as long as we behave well, you know, there's research, there's many studies that show that indoor pollutants can make us sick. There's many studies. There's so many things can make us sick in the air, indoor air. But one thing that is in common is our behaviors in our homes are a big contributor. So if, for example, if we produce a lot of moisture, you produce a lot of moisture and we don't use our exhaust fans, for example, from the bathroom or the kitchen, so we're accumulating moisture, and we know moisture is like a catalyst for many bad things to happen. So our behaviors, so that's what occupants' behaviors are important to take about, of course, the building and the history, what happens with the building in the past. So again, this is just a list of things that can happen. Here is the bathroom exhaust. You can see the bathroom and the kitchen, and we have to use them. That's probably a message from this slide. So what is ventilation? The definition of ventilation is important. Ventilation is the intentional introduction of outside air into space. So outside air is important. We're bringing outdoor air that is supposed to be fresh. So typically, we don't expect outdoor air to have viruses or human-generated pathogens. That's, you know, what we expect in the outdoor air is to be fresh, for sure, especially in a city like Vancouver. Of course, if we're in an urban area, well, maybe traffic-generated pollutants and so on, but certainly not pathogens generated by humans. So that's very important. So what is the purpose of ventilation? One purpose is health. So we want to make sure we maintain the health of people through good ventilation. And I think it's important here in the health definition, contaminants at harmful concentrations. So we want to dilute, ventilation wants to dilute contaminants so that they don't reach harmful concentrations. That's the goal. But we don't know, again, there's so many things that could be in the air, and in part we're responsible for those things. So ventilation is meant to maintain levels of concentrations very low, below the harmful levels. And then comfort is another factor. We ventilate for comfort because sometimes we have things in the air, or very often, that they're not harmful, but they're smelly, or they produce odors that we don't like. So they're not harmful. So health and comfort, the two important goals of ventilation. So one important thing in here, this is a very short time, I cannot be very specific, and there's so many possible cases, so many possible scenarios of operation and so on, configurations of systems. So I want to try to follow like a principles-based approach. So for us to understand what's going on, we know that air carries particles and air and gases and pollutants, basically. So basically it's important to control airflow. So airflow, the first thing for airflow is, or in this figure, we have the forced ventilation principles is to, well, we know the pollutants. Try to be aware what pollutant sources could be in the air. Where are the sources? In our case, well, there's humans that are the sources. Very often, like you saw in this previous list, the source comes from many possible places, many possible sources. So, but the important thing is try to know, get informed about the kind of pollutant that is in the air. Then with the driving forces, what drives the airflow that carries pollutants? So we have these forces, natural and mechanical forces. Stack effect is like a chimney. The building acts like a chimney and then drives the air from the bottom down up to the top. That's a stack effect. And this is very strong, especially in high-rise buildings and in cold climates. In cold climates, because the temperature difference between indoors and outdoors is high in winter, especially like it happens in winter. So stack effect is a strong force, and that can sometimes overpower the mechanical system. So wind, of course, wind is very erratic, it's uncertain, and so on. And then the mechanical system. The advantage of mechanical system as a driving force for ventilation is that it's controlled. Unlike the other two that are uncontrolled, the mechanical system is controlled, the mechanical force. That's very important. So then for air to travel, we need pathways. Well, what are the pathways? In buildings, so many cracks. We have the elevator shaft, we have the staircase, and so on. Oh, well, the good thing, we need to make sure, unfortunately, our multi-unit buildings are not hospitals. In hospitals, the pathways are very, very controlled, what is called compartmentalized. The buildings are compartmentalized to make sure the pathways are minimized. In our multi-unit buildings, we try, again, designers, there's the codes for sure that try mainly for fire purposes to seal the cracks between units, between areas, between different spaces. But again, multi-unit buildings are not hospitals. So air will definitely move between spaces. So we have to know that. So anyways, these are the 4 factors: important driving pollutants, the driving forces, the pathways, and the people. So another important, coming back to the principles, staying in the principles, there are 5 ventilation strategies. So that every ventilation system needs to follow. An important thing here is that all ventilation systems, I mean, they're not perfect, but they have to follow these principles and strategies. So the first strategy is source control. Source, basically, control the pollutant at the source. You replace it, remove it, isolate it. Examples in houses or in residential buildings, again, the kitchen exhaust fan, remove the moisture at the source. The bathroom exhaust fan, the kitchen, all the cooking generated smells and pollutants, and also if you have gas burners that have incomplete combustion, well, so you have to operate this exhaust. In a parking garage, of course, there's a source of pollutants, so there's the parking ventilation, so it has to be operational. So this is source control. So that's number 1. So I think the list is in order of priority. Then we have dilution, ventilation dilution. So ventilation dilutes, again, based on the definition, pollutants to keep them at concentrations below harmful concentrations. So that's very important. Dilution. So we need to bring outdoor fresh air. The third strategy is contaminant dispersion control. Basically, the rule says take the air from the cleanest areas to the dirtiest areas. So for example, in a house or in an apartment building, the air moves from the bedrooms, the living areas, towards the kitchen, the bathrooms, the laundry, the storage areas. So it shouldn't be the other way around. Goes from, this is what is called a cascade effect, from clean to dirty. So the ventilation systems are designed to direct the air from clean to dirty. Then there's filtration and cleaning. So we have to know what kind of filters to use depending on the kind of pollutants that we're dealing with. And then localized exposure, that typically in multi-unit residential buildings has not been really an issue. Right now, I guess the exposure control is using masks. That's the way. But the list is, what you see here in this slide is more related to work exposure. So these are the 5 strategies. An important thing, this balance is, everything is about this balance between source strength and removal rate. So what is the removal rate is provided by ventilation, removal of contaminant by these 4 strategies. The first 4 strategies, removal rate. So obviously you want to bring more ventilation to make sure you remove these contaminants at the source or maybe in the air. So removal rate is important. Again, it means bring more air, more fresh air. And then the source strength, well, it depends on how many people in this case are sick, and if they're concentrated in a place. And if you see a multi-unit residential building, and what are the chances that people are spending time, hours in a place, and they're sick? Well, probably the suite, if people are spending, you're spending most of your time in the suite, this is probably the most likely source, if considering if people, you say that people may be sick. In the corridors, people go fast, and like Angela was saying, people move very fast. So again, source strength is a function of time. So anyway, so that's the balance. That's another important factor. Next thing, we have 4 elements of ventilation plus 1. Now we have heat recovery. So in this slide, we can see, I'm going to illustrate how they work. First, again, we have outdoor air. Typically, again, in multi-unit buildings or in residential, this is 100% outdoor air. So it's an air handling system with fans and so on. And now we have heat recovery too in many new buildings. So outdoor air. So that's the first element. 100% outdoor air is not polluted with human-generated pathogens typically. Then we have to take this air to the places. We use ducts, a system distribution through ducts. So we bring the air from using the air handler, using ducts into the rooms. And then we have air distribution within the zone. So it means air starts moving and circulating within a particular room. And here, what Angela was saying is important. When there's many people in a room, crowding a room, that's probably where you could see that the risk is higher because there's many people in the room. So fresh air is meant to bring and dilute anything that could be in the air. Basically, that's the idea. And then the 4th element is air circulation between zones. So air moves between zones, again, between zones following the strategies that I mentioned before. So if you see this figure, how is the air? If there's a pollutant, typically, again, pollutants are, in this case, in this particular, generated by people. We don't expect to have the pollutant in the duct system or in the outdoor air. Is where people are. So in this case, again, where do we expect to find a pollutant? Where people are. Another important concept is the age of the air. We have new air is fresh. So where we have ventilation that is coming directly into a space is fresh air, is new air. Then air circulates to other places, is semi-used air, and then it becomes used air in places where after, at the very end, that you expect are the dirtiest areas. Again, the storage areas or the parking garage or something. In this case, well, is a bathroom or is another room that has an exhaust air. So air moves from supply to exhaust. And then we have heat recovery ventilation that is more an energy saving measure. So just a very short, to summarize everything, we have some principles, we have some strategies for ventilation. We have to follow, every ventilation system should follow those. So what do we want here as a takeaway? First, the ventilation principles, what I showed, are universal and apply to all types of buildings, even hospitals. So ventilation reduces the dose of any pollutant in the air by bringing fresh air of any airborne pollutant. And then therefore, it reduces the risk of transmission. We know that our ventilation systems are not infallible. They all have weaknesses, and we can discuss in detail about each system and so on. We don't have time here, but ultimately, they are designed to for removing pollutants that you expect in multi-unit residential buildings. They're not designed to deal with pathogens like in hospitals. So what to do during the pandemic? Well, first, make sure that, again, to reiterate what Angela was saying, ensure that the system is maintained and operated as designed. Operate the ventilation system continuously and specified rates, especially, for example, when people are sleeping, we're spending a lot of time in our bedrooms. Don't try to have custom fixes to open holes or do things on your own, because you may come up with unintended negative consequences and jeopardize the system's performance. And of course, if you're in your suite, open the windows and get fresh air that is coming directly to dilute whatever may be in the air. Oh, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
I'll just, oh, if you want to just go down one slide. Oh, you want to,
sorry about that.
It's all right. It's all right. I'll share. So just to kind of sum up all of our together information, I have to come back to this again and again. Close proximity is key for transmission here. And then that means that all of our physical distancing measures that we're putting in place, those are the most important things to be continuing with. Then comes the surface cleaning to prevent the cross-contamination between residents. And as Rodrigo has given us here in his principles of ventilation, healthy indoor air quality by making sure that ventilation system is running appropriately is going to promote overall respiratory health and make people less susceptible to being attacked by something like COVID. So making sure your HVAC is running the way it's supposed to be run is really key to promoting your residents' health and comfort. The last thing I'll say is to learn from this. This is the first wave. You've now have experience or you've been gathering information on what you should do. So think about perhaps putting together a pandemic protocol for your building to prepare for future events. And I think with that, we can shift over to Hunter and take some questions.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna, you can stop sharing your screen. I'll just switch back over to myself.
I gotta give up control. There we go. Hard for me to do.
Okay. So just a reminder to everyone that today's webinar will be archived and made available on our website. So please make sure that you share this. We'll send the link out to all attendees. So share that with friends and colleagues who will find this information relevant. Also, through this webinar, you'll find a few different ways to communicate with us. So you can ask questions in the question and answer box on the webinar toolbox. There's also a chat function as well. I'm going to try to stick to the questions that are coming through the Q&A as that's what it's there for. Just to be clear, if there's any questions that you have specifically for from the media for Angela, please email her. For strata governance, you can contact Tony Gioventù at tony@choa.ca.bc, choa.bc.ca, and there's strata resources available online. And as mentioned before, of course, you can also go to our website, LandlordBC.ca. You can sign up for our e-news. We also have a COVID-19 resource page there as well that you'll be able to find on our website. So going on to some of the questions that have come in. So a question that has come in from one of our attendees is, if an infected person sneezed in an elevator, how long before it would be safe for the next person to enter? And I know this is one that I've actually wanted to ask myself. How long is it? What should we be doing with elevators? What are the safe protocols in general?
Okay, well, this is why we are recommending people to be cleaning those kind of enclosed, like high-touch surfaces like the panels, especially, which is what you touch. And then, I mean, the rest of the walls should also be cleaned occasionally because they get very, very dirty. As for the air, larger particles, like the respiratory droplets, they literally fall out of the air within like 10 seconds. It says 10 seconds to under a minute, those particles have fallen. The smaller aerosols are hanging in the air for longer. Okay, so the question is can you get something from those aerosols when they've been contained inside the elevator box? The answer to that is, I don't know. We don't really understand how infectious those aerosols are. We know they're there. They may even have viruses on them, but we don't know how infectious that aerosol is. So it's kind of I mean, this is why we're telling people don't be in the elevator with the sneezing person. Sneezing people, cover your sneezes for the love. And then otherwise, just try to, exit quickly. I think, Rodrigo, don't elevators have ventilation? Like, don't they have like a little fan?
Yeah.
That's
so again, but they're not to intend to remove the pathogens. But yeah, of course, we have to operate the fans, the ventilation, and then when the doors open, ventilation shafts are really a transmission of air from the bottom to the like a piston moving air up and down. So a lot of air is moving. Well, that's a good thing because air is moving, air moves around the elevators. And when you open the door, a lot of air comes in and out. So it's not just the ventilation, a lot of air from the elevator comes in and out.
So that's
but
a good
again, it's like Angela, like you were saying, we don't really know. It's kind of hard. If somebody, you know, has to be so very unlucky that somebody sneezes and then somebody just comes in into the elevator. Oh, that would be really not good.
Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, well, I'll take the stairs. But thank you very much for that information. That's very useful, and I think that just highlights again the message that your associations and us have been saying time and time again, is that regular cleaning and common sense when it comes to social distancing is needed. So on the topic of cleaning, as you've mentioned, many people are asking, and this is a question that I know has come in quite a bit today and in the last several weeks to us at LandlordBC. What is the frequency of cleaning for areas like the elevator and laundry room and entrances? How often are you suggesting we disinfect these areas?
So we have, I think it was started in 2005, we have a pandemic influenza protocol for BC. And it's mostly aimed at healthcare settings, so like physicians' offices and stuff. And in those settings, our government is recommending us to wipe down high-touch surfaces twice a day. And so that, you have to consider that's a doctor's office, that's like a slightly higher risk environment because sick people are gathering there. In a strata building, how many times you can do it a day is going to be dependent on, I know for our building, we can't get a cleaner every day. If there's going to be other factors that play into that. Best practice would be treat it like a doctor's office, do it twice a day. But if that's not possible, then do the absolute best that you can.
Definitely. Okay. So we'll go on to the next question. This is definitely a very technical question, and I think it's for you, Rodrigo. How does negative or positive air pressure in the hallways and common areas relate to fire safety? Mm-hmm. Dispersal of smoke versus feeding the fire. Will there be changes to the air intake for the virus affect that?
Yeah, well, yeah, basically the positive pressure in the corridors is intended to keep the corridors clear. So these are the means if egress or people coming into the building. So that's the intent of this. This is just to first keep the corridors and the common areas clean. If there's a smoke in the event that there's a smoke, for example, in the suite, smokes may happen. Like typically, you know, you expect a suite, you know, a kitchen or somebody that is leaves something unattended. So it may happen in the suite. So basically, by pushing the air into the suites, you're kind of containing the smoke in the suite. That's the idea. So that's something that works. There's different ventilation systems that, you know, I don't want to extend too much. There's the corridor pressurization system that pushes more air, even ventilation air into the suites. That has changed now, is more distributed system, but yeah, I don't want to go into the details. So basically, yeah, I don't think there's need for anything to change in terms of the code or in terms and with this virus. Again, because we bring fresh air from the outside, air is coming from an intake that is typically at the roof and is being distributed to the corridors is clean air and pushing the air to contain the fire in the suites. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. Was that the question?
Yeah, I think that definitely does help and provide some information. It's not so much increasing the pressure or intake, but just ensuring that it is working properly.
Yeah, no, it's not necessary. It's just the working. The pressures are very low too. It's not big pressures. You think in residential buildings, the airflows are low. The pressures are low, and we keep pushing the air into the suites. That's the idea. That's the goal.
Yeah. So another question that we have here, and hopefully we know it is, I know there's a lot of resources online. There's a lot of information available online in general about the type of cleaning products that we should be using when cleaning these common areas. And there's, I know that you've mentioned in the presentation today, Angela, that you don't need to go out and buy something special. One thing that people are using is a dilution of bleach. And do you have a good ratio for that? We've seen a lot of different formulas out there for how to dilute bleach.
Okay, we absolutely do. We have a great resource for that. If you go to our NCCEH page, ncceh.ca, we have a COVID topic page, a COVID resource page. And on that page, there's a whole bunch of stuff, including a section on sanitizers. And that section has both a guide on how to dilute bleach, and it has an online calculator on how to dilute bleach, because the #1 mistake that people make is they make it too strong. And then they're ruining surfaces, they're ruining their clothes, they're inhaling something that's giving them respiratory irritation. So yeah, go to our website, find the calculator, and find the guide document that we have, especially like there's one on household cleaning, and it's really good. So those two things will help prevent you from poisoning or irritating yourself.
Okay, I'm just gonna switch over and look at some of the things that are coming in through our chat. So I think some questions have shown up there.
That's a lot of questions.
There are a lot of questions that are coming in. So thank you, everyone who's sending in these questions. A really good question, actually, I guess, about ventilation. So what should we be communicating to our residents regarding the use of stovetop ventilation, so the exhaust fan above a stove, and bathroom? Should they be running it all the time, or just when they're showering or cooking?
Yeah, good question. Well, the stove, of course, like the kitchen exhaust range should be used when people are cooking, basically, only when people are cooking. And then the bathroom, basically, I mean, the ideal situation is that they have a humidistat, and then where the humidity is high, then the exhaust fan starts working, or even it ramps up, increases speed. So for the bathroom exhaust, the airflow is lower than for the kitchen. So it could be run continuously. It doesn't hurt. It's good. It brings more air. But typically, when the more moisture generated in the bathroom, then it should be increase the speed. Obviously, not all suites, not all apartments have this kind of like a humidistats or this. So basically, for people, whenever they use the bathroom, especially for taking showers, long showers, and these kind of things, again, turn on the fan.
I would add to that, if you're worried about the virus being in your home, or you're sick, or somebody in your family is sick, opening a window is really, like if the weather's nice, there's no reason not to do it. Open it up, get the fresh air in. If the virus is in the air, you're diluting it, you're reducing your risk.
Yeah. Can I actually, Hunter, sorry, can I show, just to explain one slide here?
I can and I'll switch it over to you.
I'll share this. Okay. Got it. Okay, share the screen. Yeah, share. Okay, can you see the screen?
We can.
Okay, so this shows a little bit, just to answer the previous questions. The corridor brings the air, here you see the green is the air coming. It's pressurized into the mechanical air. It's pushing the air into the corridors, it's fresh air again, and it's coming into the suites. That's the intent. The systems are not perfect, but the intent is to bring and contain whatever's in the suites, contain it there. That's the idea. If you run, for example, an exhaust fan, like this little arrows on the top, sometimes are like an exhaust fan with a kit, you're kind of what is doing, kind of enhance and bring in more air from the corridor. You're enhancing this effect. Is not necessary, basically is not needed, as long as, again, as your ventilation system is working properly. That's the important thing to emphasize here for the previous questions. In this previous slide, just quick here, we don't have a mechanical system, is not working. So basically we're just subject to the natural forces that are irregular or random and changing daily. So if we don't have a mechanical system controlling, you see the difference between the two slides. That's the intent, is to show that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'll stop sharing.
Oh, yeah, okay. So we'll go through just a few more questions. I'm not gonna, Q&A. Okay. So a question for you, Angela. If I were to leave a rag soaked in a greater than 10% bleach solution, can I reuse it every day without washing it, using it to wash communal doors and handles, railings, etc.? So if it's staying in that 10% bleach solution after use.
That is a very, very strong bleach solution. So I'm going to assume that it's actually not 10%. I'm going to assume that it's 0.5% because household bleach is 5.6%. So if you're diluting that 10 times, then it should be 0.5%. My personal preference would be to be using clean stuff, and you know, to be very, very careful with bleach. Like you really don't need that much. I really strongly encourage you to go to our website, find our guidance document. I believe the recommended concentration is actually 500 ppm. And yeah, if you find that calculator, you'll be able to get the right concentration for use on your surfaces. And the reason why is that bleach is quite corrosive. So you're wiping down doorknobs and stuff like that. But if you're using a very concentrated solution, you're going to do damage, which is the main concern here. You don't need very much. And yeah, so check out those resources and make sure that you're not using too powerful a solution. As for reusing it, I always prefer to wash it hot, dry it hot, and then start again.
Certainly. So another question about laundry rooms and the risk or potential risk, or is there a potential risk if someone who is infected uses a machine, they perhaps it's cleaned in between in terms of the surfaces, but the inside, having that shared laundry machine used over and over again, is there a risk to residents by using that machine?
That's a great question. So the first thing I would recommend you do is go to our website, go to our COVID page, and find our laundry room poster and put that up on the wall. So here's how it is with laundry machines. You've already identified the main risk factor, which is the outside of the machine. If somebody is sick and they've got their dirty sheets in their hamper and then they put their hamper on the machine, they've just contaminated the outside of the machine. The machine outside surface, you should be cleaning before you use the machine. Just get a wipe it, wipe the controls, open it up. Once, however, you put your stuff inside and it gets in contact with the water and the soap, that virus is dead. This virus, it's a teddy bear virus. It really doesn't take that much soap, and an adequate amount of soap and warm water is more than enough to kill it. And so you don't need to be putting bleach in between cycles. That's just not necessary. Just make sure that you clean the outside of the machine. And also, if you have a sick person in your house and you need to wash clothes, you can wash their clothes and your clothes together. Once they're inside the drum of the wash machine and the water and soap is on them, it's game over for that virus. And then you just take it out, you put it in the dryer, you dry it hot, and you dry it completely. It will be just fine. You don't need to worry about anything except for fingers touching the outside of the machine and the controls.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank both of you, Angela and Rodrigo, for that informative presentation and very timely and necessary information for landlords and property managers and strata councils. So thank you, and also thank you to our attendees for your insightful questions. Again, we'd like to remind you that this webinar will be archived on the LandlordBC website, www.landlordbc.ca. And thank you again to today's sponsor, Wise Submetering. So again, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, that is a lot.